The closer we get to Donald Trump's presidency, the more the Biden administration is working to safeguard against Donald Trump's threats against our allies, both at home and abroad. And of course, that means the people of Ukraine in their fight pushing back against Vladimir Putin. Now, for a long time, President Biden has been working to secure as much aid for the people of Ukraine as possible in opposition to Republicans trying to push back against it. But now that Donald Trump is becoming president, we know where this war is likely to go. And so in the final days of his administration, Joe Biden is working tirelessly to stop Donald Trump from giving Ukraine to Putin entirely. But it's not just Joe Biden. A certain high-level Republican, who Donald Trump certainly doesn't like, is working with Joe Biden as well. And it's driving Donald Trump crazy. And we are going to get into all of that. But before we do, if I could quickly ask you to leave a like on this video, and if you haven't already and you enjoy our channel, to hit that subscribe button. It goes a long way, and it really means the world to me. Now, before we get into what this Republican had to say about Donald Trump and his foreign policy approach, I want to get into an update from National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan about what the Biden administration is doing to provide aid for the people of Ukraine.
First, what I'm saying is we are going to do everything in our power for these 50 days to get Ukraine all the tools we possibly can to strengthen their position on the battlefield so that they'll be stronger at the negotiating table. And President Biden directed me to oversee a massive surge in the military equipment that we are delivering to Ukraine so that we have spent every dollar that Congress has appropriated to us by the time that President Biden leaves office. So that's first and foremost what we're focused on. And then I've encouraged the Ukrainian team to engage the incoming team as well as to engage all of our allies and partners because, again, on January 21st, the war in Ukraine doesn't just go away. Obviously, the new team will have its own policy, its own approach, and I can't speak to that. But what I can do is make sure that we put Ukraine in the best possible position when we hand off the baton.
Well, let me ask you about that. The New York Times reported on the various measures that you're taking to shore up Ukraine's defenses at this critical moment. And the article said this, quote, several officials even suggested that Mr. Biden could return nuclear weapons to Ukraine that were taken from it after the fall of the Soviet Union. That would be an instant and enormous deterrent. But such a step would be complicated and have serious implications. Is that something that's under consideration, that the U.S. would return nuclear weapons to Ukraine? Is that something you're considering?
That is not under consideration, no. What we are doing is surging various conventional capacities to Ukraine so that they can effectively defend themselves and take the fight to the Russians, not nuclear capability.
President Zelensky has already come out and said that he knows he needs U.S. support to win this war, but he will not be forced to the table to negotiate with Putin. He will not allow Donald Trump to strong-arm him. Him and his people will continue to fight because they are brave. And so we need to do everything that we can to continue to support them. And an additional $1 billion in aid, a package being sent over to Ukraine, will certainly go far in helping that effort, but not far enough. We have to continue to do everything we can to support the Ukrainians, even when Donald Trump is saying nonsense like this.
There are people being killed in that war at levels that nobody's ever seen before. You have to go back to the Second World War, and even that, if you take a look at, and you know what it is? It's the soldiers largely. The cities have been emptied out and demolished. The country has been demolished. If I won that election, which you know how I feel about it, I won't get into it because we don't need to start that argument. I think it's an easy argument. It was really proven even more conclusively by the win that I had on this one. But
you did
had
I, sir.
Well, that's your opinion, but I disagree with it. Had I assumed, kept control, number one, Israel wouldn't have happened. Number two, Ukraine would have never happened. It would have never happened, Ukraine, Russia. But the number of people that are being killed, soldiers, young, beautiful soldiers, hundreds of thousands of people are being killed. And, you know, it's very interesting. It's level, totally level, the battlefields.
Donald Trump saying that he would have stopped the war, or he will stop the war or prevent further wars, is really just Donald Trump admitting that he's happy to make concessions to murderous dictators and allow them to invade other countries, invade their sovereign territory. That's what Donald Trump wants to do in Ukraine. Ending the war is ceding land to Putin. And if where the war is being fought right now on those lines in Ukraine, If that's where we ultimately see an end to this war, it will be a loss for the Ukrainian people that Donald Trump, of course, will spin as this huge win for peace. Peace, of course, being giving Putin land. And it's terrible. That's why Democrats have spent so long calling it out. And not just Democrats, but Republicans as well. Take a listen to Mitch McConnell, who took shots at Donald Trump in this isolationism approach in a recent speech right here.
Merely invoking peace through strength is not enough. We have an obligation to provide for the common defense, and it calls us to actually build and maintain that strength. Unless we're willing to spend the necessary resources to address them, talk is cheap. And a defense authorization bill that fails to set top-line funding above the president's request would be a tragic missed opportunity we would likely come to regret. A rerun of the Budget Control Act's harm to military readiness would be a devastating abdication of our responsibility. We need to make the sort of investments in American primacy and hard power that the world hasn't seen since Ronald Reagan was calling the shots.
Clearly not a great relationship between Mitch McConnell and Donald Trump, and it's not going to get better during this administration in which Mitch McConnell has promised that he will kind of be a renegade in the Senate. He'll do whatever he wants. Now, I don't trust Mitch McConnell to be voting against Donald Trump in support of helping working families. It's certainly not something he's ever done in his entire career in politics, but I do like the idea of him pushing back against Donald Trump, being a thorn in his side. If a terrible person can do a few good things, it's not going to make me like Mitch McConnell, but it's going to make me happy. It's going to make me enjoy a little bit of Republican infighting. I like that. But it's not just overseas where Donald Trump is planning to make his attacks. It's also domestically where Donald Trump is rolling out his mass deportation plan, which was perfectly called out by Texas Congresswoman, someone who we love on this show, someone who I'm playing a lot of clips of lately. So let me know if you enjoy those, Jasmine Crockett.
When we're looking at things like this, no, you don't just go and round somebody up and kick them out. There is a process, right? And then you look at the money that other people are going to make, because now you have to have facilities to house them. And I have a feeling that some of these people that invested a lot of money into Trump are very excited to build these facilities to hold and house people. But we already know that we had a shortage of officers on the border. They were constantly taking officers from everywhere else and deploying them to the border. So now you're going to need even more officers. And we still haven't talked about increasing our technology to do the things that they claim that they're doing, which is to try to keep the bad folk out, try to keep the drugs out, try to keep the guns out. And they've yet to talk about the technology that it would take to actually get that done.
Tom Homan, he engaged in a public back and forth with Mike Johnston. That's the Democratic mayor of Denver. Homan threatened to jail Johnston after the mayor said that his city will resist efforts to use the military to carry out deportations. And here's Johnston's response to all this.
What we're not going to do is support deploying the 101st Airborne into American cities to pull 10-year-old kids out of their classrooms in handcuffs. I think America's not after another conflict on this issue. If they are going to send the U.S. Army or the Navy SEALs into Denver to pursue folks to pull them off the job at hotels or restaurants where they're working, or pull kids off the soccer field, I think we will see Denverites and folks around the country who will nonviolently resist that.
Do you expect mass protests in response to mass deportations?
I do, but I also don't expect mass deportations. I think that it sounds good and they look like the tough guys, and we know that that has really been their brand, is to basically look like the bullies that they are. But, you know, when you start to get into the nitty gritty and start to talk about details, that's when they're like, well, we didn't realize this or that. Or even when you start to talk about the cost, when we start to ramp up what the cost will look like for us to actually effectuate this, but then also look at the cost to our economy, I just don't really see it happening. As the mayor pointed out, he talked about those service workers and things like that. And someone who serves on the agriculture committee, I can tell you that I have talked to countless farmers that talk about the need for these migrant workers. So listen, unless your viewers are planning to send their kids to school so that they can go and work on the farms, then God bless, we can make sure that we keep American agriculture going. But the reality is that that is not who's been working the farms in recent years. It has been these migrants. When we look at our hospitality, it has been migrants. When we look at the restaurant workers, it has been migrants. And so, you know, when we start to look at the cost, not only coming directly out of our pocket to effectuate this, but also the cost to our economy, I just don't think that they're going to do it. And ultimately, he'll blame it on somebody else, or we're all supposed to forget, just like we forgot about the wall, that Mexico was going to pay to build.
Okay. It's always a reality check with you, and I'm very grateful for it.
Donald Trump's plans, both at home and abroad, are dangerous. And we have to continue to call out the ways that he wants to frame them. Because when Donald Trump is deporting kids and separating families, he will say that he is only deporting violent criminals. Now, of course, there will be some criminals. It is a disproportionately smaller amount of illegal immigrants who commit crimes as compared to American citizens. It's a negligible amount in that comparison. But Donald Trump will still be deporting people who have committed crimes. And he'll say that's all of the people, all of the millions of people who he's deporting. But that won't be true. And so we can't let him frame it that way. The same goes for Ukraine. Donald Trump will say he brought peace to the world because everyone respects his strength, when really he did the most weak and cowardly thing possible. He bent the knee to Putin and turned his back on our allies, turned his back on democracy. We need to call it out. And we can't just allow Donald Trump to set the framing and how we battle back and forth on this discussion. We have to make clear what is truly at stake and what Donald Trump is doing. And that is what we're going to do on this show every single day. And if you want to support that, as always, you can hit that subscribe button. You can leave a like on this video. And if you stuck around to the end, you can drop a blue heart in the comments. It's going to be a tough fight, guys, but we're here together. And until next time, I'll see you soon.